We've had a terrible story come out of Scotland about sexual abuse on young children, which we'll be returning to later in the programme. And the appeal hearing of child killer John Venables is underway. It ends today. And Olivia Pratt-Corbell's murderer, Thomas Cashman, starts his hearing later today. So we're asking, is enough, frankly? Should anyone who murders a child automatically get a longer life sentence? Well, we're joined this morning by the social campaigner and entrepreneur, Winston Davies. He believes longer sentences are the way forward, but psychotherapist and social worker Trish Barry-Relph thinks the priority should be support, not further punishment. And Trish, however laudable that sentiment is, can you offer that same support, that same understanding, that same kindness, that same hand to rehabilitation to psychopaths?
Good morning. So the first thing I would like to say is that nothing that Venables says is an excuse for his crime. I would also like to extend my deepest sympathy to Jamie Bolger's parents, because this must be a very difficult time when this is whipped up. When there is a parole hearing with Venables being considered for release. What I would like to say is that children as young as 10, which Venables was at the time, are seriously disturbed to carry out the killing of a 2-year-old child. I think the questions societally are around the welfare principle and children, because they were children at 10. Are they perceived as needing and receiving protection from the consequences of their immaturity? We know since 1963 that the age of criminal responsibility in the UK is 10. The UK is also a signatory to the UN Rights of the Child, which has criticised the low rate of criminal responsibility, one of the lowest in Europe. In Norway it's 15, in other countries it's 12 to 14, and the recommendations are it should be 12 to 14.
Okay, well, let's hear what Winston Davies, who's in the studio here. Winston is a social campaigner, he's an entrepreneur, he's turned his life around in many ways, and you're hearing what Trish is saying, the vibes that she's giving out towards understanding these killers. What would you say?
Look, I'm a massive believer in rehabilitation. I was in prison 15 years ago for cannabis, rehabilitated, turned my life around and whatnot. And definitely, people should be offered support and counselling, all of that. But for me, there's a line that we get to. And when you've killed children, serious sexual offences, murder, there's a point where people have got to say, you know what, I've got to take the responsibility for my actions and live with the consequences of it. And I kind of feel like you get to a point where how much can you actually go back? How much can you rehabilitate when you've crossed that line? And for me, that 42 years that Cashman's trying to appeal, I think that's lenient. If someone comes into my house and kills my kids, I'm not really talking about prison. Right. What are you talking about? If someone comes into my house and killed one of my children, I would want them gone. Yeah. I mean, Trish, that you can understand from a parent's point of view, many parents would feel absolutely the same. In the case of Venables, I'm fascinated. He was a child when he committed murder. He was 10 years old. How on earth, having grown up behind bars, having had no experience of normal life, apart from taking another life, how on earth can you be rehabilitated and capable of entering into a normal society situation where you're supposed to hold down a job and live in a house? He hasn't grown up in any normal sense. Surely he can't be released.
Well, I mean, that is the responsibility of the services. They are there to rehabilitate, to provide support. If we look at the history, Venables had an assessment by the clinical psychologist who identified that he didn't have any internalized model of how to set his own boundaries. There was a lot of dysfunctional family dynamics, and he wasn't provided with the role modeling that he needed to be able to manage his behavior His impulse control was poor. There was neuropsychological difficulties, and he was truanting from school, which is why he was in the shopping centre that day. So, I mean, these are all issues that are a grave concern to us as a society, because children are the responsibility of their parents. Now, I understand that Venable's parents were by his side and they've had to have a change of identity too. But I think the question has to be, these are very rare occurrences. And if an adult commits a crime, they serve their time and they usually can be rehabilitated and they can be on licence for life. And certainly with Venables, he will be on the sex abuse offenders register, and there is very stringent risk criteria around the management of that and the assessment of risk. Now, when he was released at 18, he was deemed to be a trivial risk. I suppose the question needs to be asked, as you quite rightly say, at 18, if he's been institutionalised in a prison regime, what experience did he have of the world and who prepared him for release? Even with children in care, we have laws whereby you need to support them up to age 23, because children from 18 to 23...
Time dictates that I've got to cut in on you here and give Winston the last word. You've heard what Trish is saying. At 18, he's deemed to be a trivial risk.
Look, I think that case is, like I said, a unique case. They were kids when they committed the murder. I think that even since that they've been released from prison, there's been instances where they've committed more offences and shown that they're basically gone beyond repair, I think. And at the end of the day, if you've gone that far, again, there's no coming back for me.
Well, that's what Winston and Trish think this morning. We thank both of our contributors and we ask you at home, let us know what you think on this highly controversial issue.